Hi guys, welcome to another episode of our podcast Talent First. Today we have with us someone who's lived the full cycle of a person in the analytics industry. He started in the industry as a junior level resource, moved up the ladder, eventually started his own analytics company, sold it, went to a leadership role, and now is gonna start back again soon. So hi Sati, hi, how are you?
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me here. And I started loving myself when I heard my introduction from you.
So Sati, how are things going?
Things are going well. This is an amazing period to be alive in, right? Especially if you're an Indian or in India. There's no better time to be alive at. So not too bad.
Perfect. So Sati, I think you have seen some of our podcasts also. So, आप जानते हो starting में we ask people about an elevator pitch.
Okay.
And now you are in the startup ecosystem, so you should know how to say it, right? So, what is your elevator pitch?
Now you put me on the spot. So my elevator pitch is would be really very simple. I have in my life there are 2 or 3 things that have always recurringly found their way into what I do. Curiosity, a bit of being a revolutionary, right? I'm carefully avoiding the word anarchist here. And just somebody who loves being in the moment, enjoying, what you do. So if you're not enjoying what you do, then you're doing the wrong thing. So my elevator pitch really boils down to that everything that I've done in life, professionally or otherwise, is some combination of these 3 things, right? And that sort of is something that you'd regularly find from my childhood to where I stand now.
Perfect. So, Sati, let's take a step back. Let's go back to your schooling days, right?
Right.
Tell us, where are you from? घर में कौन था and all of that.
Okay. So, and that's a good place to start, because any story that I have to say about myself will start with my parents.
Definitely.
Right? And my, I
थोड़ा बहुत हिंदी अगर
बिल्कुल आएगी. So और मैं बताता हूँ कैसे आएगी. So I am from Orissa, from Cuttack, right? And my dad is an engineer, and he's a classic IIT nerdy guy, right? Brilliant at what he does. He still has records standing in IIT Delhi against his name. Writes books. He's that kind of guy. My mom was the first postgraduate out of a village. First woman graduate and postgraduate out of a village. University rank holder. So
पढ़े लिखे लोग थे.
पढ़े लिखे लोग थे, और मैं सोचता हूँ कि वो जीन्स कहाँ चले. तो कुछ तो आए हैं, थोड़े और आ जाते हैं. But so the story starts there, and so that is one part of it. That's what the family that I was born into. So education बहुत important था, right? Always. Money was almost never there. When I say never there, in the sense, we were never poorly off, right? My dad was a government servant, so we always had good food to eat. We had, great clothes to wear, and we had a great education.
Perfect.
Right? But we didn't have
affluence.
We didn't have affluence, right? I mean, so I didn't. The first car I drove was the car I bought.
Okay.
Right? So it's that kind of a journey. तो एक वो part हो जाती है मेरे life की when I think about it. The other part of my life is कि मैं हूँ कटक से, but मेरे primary and middle school दिल्ली में थे.
अच्छा. So I'm also from Delhi.
See, so and तभी मैं बोल रहा था कि मेरी हिंदी आएगी अभी. So 9th standard तक मैं दिल्ली में पढ़ा.
जी.
फिर मैं कटक गया, right? And
दिल्ली में कहाँ पे पढ़े आप?
मैं सफदरजंग एनक्लेव there's this place in South Delhi. वहाँ पे there's this Greenfield School.
Yeah, famous school.
तो Greenfield School में मेरी पूरी मतलब primary and middle school was.
वहाँ पे तो अमीर लोग जाते हैं.
मैं रहता था ना वहाँ पे.
समझ गया.
तो which is an interesting thing I'll come to.
Right.
Actually, I'll tell you right now. तो part of I think that has defined me as a person. And some of it, happens to all of us, where we grew up, where we happen to end up. तो पैदा तो मैं कटक में हुआ था, लेकिन कुछ 6 महीने में मैं दिल्ली पहुंच गया था. एंड देन फिर मैंने अगले 12-13 साल दिल्ली में निकले, इन साउथ दिल्ली, राइट, लाइक इन इंडिया, इन 80s इंडिया, मतलब कहाँ बेटर यू कैन बी. और फिर मैं वहाँ से मैं पहुँचा कटक. अब प्री इंटरनेट वर्ल्ड में ना कटक और दिल्ली आर लाइक वर्ल्ड्स अपार्ट. आज की डेट में इतना फर्क नहीं रहता, एवरीबडी नोज व्हाट्स हैपनिंग. लेकिन इन दैट टाइम इट वाज लाइक अ वर्ल्ड अपार्ट, राइट. कि मैं कटक पहुंचा कि मैं टिम्बकटू पहुंचा, ज़्यादा फर्क नहीं था. एंड फ्यू थिंग्स हैपेंड. आई वाज अ वेरी पेनफुली शाय चाइल्ड. आपने जो बोला, राइट, कि साउथ दिल्ली अमीर लोग हैं, बिल्कुल सही है. हम अमीर नहीं थे, हम दिल्ली से भी नहीं थे. सो देयर वाज ऑलवेज अ सेंस ऑफ कि यू आर ट्राइंग टू फिट इन सम वेज. एंड देन यू रियलाइज कि आपके पास क्या है, आपका दिमाग है, आपके पेरेंट्स ने जो एजुकेशन दी है वो है. सो दैट बिकेम देन द गो टू.
सो एक अंदर से एक पेंट अप चीज भी होगी कि आई एम स्मार्टर देन दीस फोक्स, दिखाऊंगा एक दिन इनको मैं.
तो अब वो आप एक और सेगवे में जा रहे हो, वो भी मैं बताऊंगा कि मैं नेचुरली कॉम्पिटिटिव इंसान नहीं हूँ.
Really?
Yeah. So in a sense that, like coming first in the class was never my thing.
जी.
But अगर आपने मेरे को बोल दिया कि आपसे नहीं होगा, फिर आप देख लो.
ईगो पे आ जाएगी तो थोड़ा.
फिर आप देख लो, क्योंकि देखो अब तक तो आप खुश थे, मैं खुश था. अब आप मेरे पे बात ले आए तो फिर अलग. Then it's a different thing, right? So I think some of that, yes, definitely drove me to do better, right? And certain things you were better, right? And but I was also very painfully shy, right? So there are things that I could have done a lot more of in my primary and middle school. I never did.
Right.
And फिर मैं कटक आया. अब कटक में रिवर्स स्टोरी थी. अब कटक में वो था कि अरे तो दिल्ली से आया बंदा, तो स्मार्ट है, इसकी तो इंग्लिश भी अच्छी है. अच्छा, ठीक है. And and so it was a different perspective. This is 91. And so it's still
Naveen Patnaik had just come in power. His father was in power.
His father had just come.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, very young.
Yeah.
The state was changing quite a bit.
The state was just starting to change.
Yes.
Just starting to change.
Right.
It was a very interesting time to move, and I moved to this, and Cuttack has this, and I remember this. उस टाइम पे वो थी मूवी आई थी, कल्ट मूवी थी उस टाइम, उस जमाने की, जो जीता वही सिकंदर. अब जो जीता वही सिकंदर में एक स्टोरी लाइन है which revolves around these 3 schools. एक बहुत फैंसी बॉय स्कूल होता था, एक बहुत फैंसी गर्ल स्कूल होता था, और एक आपका काफ़ी मतलब वो थोड़ा पजामा छाप टाइप. You had a third school. Right. And obviously our protagonists were in the third school. अब कटक में क्या है, there are 2, उस टाइम पे एटलीस्ट, अब तो और आ गए हैं, उस टाइम पे ऐसा ही सीन था. 2 स्कूल थे, एक 120 साल पुराना, एक 140 साल पुराना. 140 साल पुराना was a girls school, 120 साल पुराना was a boys school but had become co-ed. वहाँ मेरे को एडमिशन मिली. अच्छा. तो मिल गई एडमिशन. बट अब मेरे पेरेंट्स वे नॉट देयर फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम. सो ऑब्वियसली यू आस्क कैसी जगह है, कैसा स्कूल है. उनको लोगों ने बताया यार आपको कुछ नहीं पता, यहाँ पे सारे अमीर लोग के बच्चे जाते हैं और ये तो ड्रग्स और ये और वो चलता है.
तब भी था सब कुछ. अब
कितना था पता नहीं. मैंने तो कभी नहीं देखा. बट एक बार वो मम्मी पापा के कान में आ गया तो फिर राइट. सो फिर मैं कहाँ गया, मैं गया तीसरे स्कूल. अब यहाँ पे मतलब 100+ बैचेस निकल चुकी हैं साल, मतलब 100 साल पुराने, और मैं जिस स्कूल में गया उसमें मैं बैच नंबर 3 था. ठीक है. तो लिटरली स्कूल हम देख रहे हैं हमारे सामने बंद था. स्कूल भी स्टार्ट था. एंड सो ऑब्वियसली यू हैड स्टूडेंट्स देयर, मिक्स पैक स्टूडेंट्स देयर. Those 2 years of my school were the most amazing school years ever. 9th and 10th. And I came like 9th का टर्म एक ख़त्म होने को आ रहा है और मैं आया हूँ. मैं वैसे ही नाराज़ हूँ अपने पेरेंट कि कहाँ ले आए मेरे को, मेरी तो ज़िंदगी बर्बाद हो गई अब. राइट. इस टाइप का द टीनेज एंगस्टर्स ऑल कमिंग थ्रू, एंड आई हैव लेफ्ट जस्ट साउथ दिल्ली बिहाइंड. And I'm there, but I'm telling you that the transition that happened in that school, it taught me many things in life, in hindsight, right? I used to be a painfully shy guy, I just told you. यहाँ पे आई रिमेंबर मैं आया एंड एक दिन वो जो उड़ीसा का बिगेस्ट स्कूल लेवल फेस्ट होता है वो मेरे माय आंटी का जो मेरा जो घर था उनके बगल में हो रहा था. अब मैं वहाँ घूम रहा था. अब मेरी आंटी ने बोला, अरे तुम तो ज़रूर पार्ट, तुम तो दिल्ली से आए हो. तो सबका वो था स्टार, तुम तो दिल्ली से आए, तुम तो सब आता होगा, तुम बड़े स्मार्ट. तो मैंने कहा कि अब मेरे को कहा कि अच्छा मैं जाके ना उधर घूम के ही आ जाता हूँ. तो आई वेंट देयर बिकॉज आई वाज देयर एंड देयर वाज नोबडी एल्स फ्रॉम माई स्कूल. उस टाइम पे आई रिमेंबर नोबडी एल्स हैड कम फ्रॉम माई स्कूल एंड दीज फैंसी स्कूल्स वर देयर इन ड्रोव्स. ये बच्चे उनके ना ये सब में, एंड इट वाज अ मल्टी डिसिप्लिनरी थिंग. आपका डिबेट है, चेस है और कुछ एक्सटेम्पोर है, तो ऐसे कुछ काफ़ी आर्ट वगैरह. मैंने कुछ ना 4-5 चीज़ों में अपने नाम ऐसे ही डाल दिए,
देखेंगे क्या होता है.
ठीक है, ऐसे ही डाल दिए. एंड आई एंडेड अप विनिंग अ कपल ऑफ थिंग्स. एंड मोर देन दैट, वो क्या होता है जब वो फाइनली जो फाइनल नाइट था फेस्ट का, जब अवार्ड्स आ रहे हैं, दे यूज टू हैव दिस बेस्ट पार्टिसिपेंट.
तो आपको मिल गया
वो ना कोई 5 फुट की शील्ड थी. उससे पहले मेरे को ना कुछ नहीं मिला जिंदगी में, बिकॉज मैंने कभी पार्टिसिपेट नहीं किया.
राइट.
और यहाँ पे ना 2 ऐसे कप हैं और एक इतनी बड़ी शील्ड है, ठीक है, और वो मिल गया मेरे को. एंड आई थिंक दैट वॉज अ बिट ट्रांसफॉर्मेशनल. कि मतलब क्या रोका, किसने रोका था, या क्या किस चीज़ ने रोका था, राइट. एंड आई थिंक उसके बाद आई बिकेम पार्ट ऑफ आवर स्कूल टीम एंड आई विल गो बैक टू द जो जीता वही थे सिकंदर थीम, राइट. बिकॉज ये छोटा शहर है, प्री इंटरनेट वर्ल्ड है, राइट, कंजर्वेटिव शहर है. एंड तो व्हाट इज द मोस्ट सोशल थिंग यू कैन डू इन दोज डेज? क्विजेस. बिकॉज ये बोर्नवीटा क्विज और ये लिम्का क्विज, दीज वर बिग डील.
डेरेक ओब्रायन और
हाँ, करेक्ट. सो डेरेक ओब्रायन की कितनी क्विजेस में मैं गया हूँ.
Really?
या सो एंड बिकॉज यूज्ड टू कम डाउन फ्रॉम कैलकाटा
right.
फॉर द स्टेट फाइनल्स एंड ऑल दैट. और इट्स somehow थिंग्स केम टुगेदर. हमारी स्कूल का ना कहीं पे कोई नाम नहीं होता था. हम फुटबॉल मैच खेलने आते तो 15-1 का स्कोर लाइन ऐसा होता था. क्विज में इट जस्ट somehow happened दैट ये पहली टीम बनी थी, बाय द वे, इससे पहले कभी कोई टीम नहीं थी. और वो ऐसी बन गई कि हम 2 साल में जो मैं था स्कूल में, वी डिडंट लूज वंस. हमारा कंपटीशन ऐसा हो गया कि हमारा था कि जो भी नेक्स्ट टीम होगी उसके डबल पॉइंट होने चाहिए हमारे. एंड 90% ऑफ द टाइम इट यूज्ड टू बी देयर. वी क्वालिफाइड फॉर ऑल द नेशनल फाइनल्स. मैं जा नहीं पाया बिकॉज वो आईसीएसई के बोर्ड आ गए. मैं तो जा सकता था, प्रिंसिपल ने रोक दिया. So the long story short, what I'm trying to say is that I think and that mixture, आप South Delhi में, you have studied with a certain kind of people, right? They conduct themselves a certain way, they speak a certain way. Then you go to a really small town. In that you go to a non
average school.
An average school, right? You meet with a very different set of people. Like when I say different, it was like different, right? And that perspective, I realized later in life, right? I was never, or I shouldn't put it that way. Empathy जो चाहिए होती ना in a conversation, right? I think one is you're naturally, you're an empath. The other is the perspective. How do you even relate to somebody? That spectrum, I think, gave me the ability to be able to relate to all kinds of people from all walks of life. And I think when you're building teams, that really helps. I personally believe that if you think of leadership qualities, right, I think empathy to me is right up there as one of the strongest things you can do. Because, and this is something I realized even more acutely in the startup part of my journey. क्योंकि you realize उस time पे कि ये designation वगैरह सब धोखा है, right? So you just happen to be managing people. You have authority. It's an artificial construct. You have been authority that you've been giving to you. It's not a natural authority that you've gained for yourself. Unlike in a startup. In a startup, you quickly realize that number of years of experience, all of that, nothing matters. It's a bunch of equals trying to build something. You are maybe first among those equals, right?
So tell me one thing, right?
Yeah.
What I can understand is that एक information arbitrage था.
Yeah.
There was that आपने वो दिल्ली में काफ़ी न्यू एज चीज़ें देख ली,
right.
और यहाँ पे आके आपने उन लोगों को सिखा दिया, और एक तरह से आप एक लीडर उभर गए. Right, and now we look at the startup world.
Right.
कुछ हद तक we have seen that a lot of innovation that happened in Silicon Valley.
Right.
A lot of people did the same thing.
Yeah.
So is that a core, like you see that?
So it's an interesting perspective you brought. I see it a little differently.
Right.
Information arbitrage is a real thing in any scenario.
Still is today.
Still is, and it will remain, right? So that is definitely something that is true. But more than that, like I said, right, and especially in the startup journey, I realized that and especially if you're building like a product business or a deep tech business, you need all things to come together well, right? So what you're really doing when you are the most successful is when you've enabled everybody else to be their best.
Right.
And the single, I think, biggest quality you need is empathy. Right?
Empathy.
I need to know what makes you tick. Why are you here? Right? You could be doing a job anywhere else. And when you're a startup, it means 90% of the world can pay better than you. Right? So then what is holding them with you? Right? It's the vision. That's very important. Right? And it's the comfort they feel in working with this group of people and trying to create something new. So, so that is, I think, definitely something that this variation helped me. And then I went, my master's I did in Ahmedabad. So north, east, west ho gaya tha. So then when I had to pick my
college,
my workplace, I picked Bangalore because I'd never come south. In my life, I'd never come, the southernmost point I'd hit was Bombay. So
this time Bangalore was booming, right? This
Bangalore
2000
was
this is
just starting.
96?
2001.
2001.
Yeah.
This is the time when Y2K happened.
Yes.
So Bangalore was in the news.
Bangalore was definitely in the news. And uski bhi alag interesting stories hain, right? Because this is still early internet era. So you don't know much about the place, right? Now information is ubiquitous. हर चीज पे मिल जाएगा आपको.
एक mystery थी Bangalore के बाद.
The mystery थी. I remember the biggest thing that hit me was the weather. I remember coming here and this is still early cell phone days. महंगा भी होता था. तो नौकरी अभी लगी थी तो सेल फोन था नहीं. तो घर वो STD बूथ पे आप लाइन लगाओ और फिर घर पे फोन करो. मम्मी पूछती दिस इज अप्रैल एंड हैव कम. अप्रैल एंड जो बाकी 2001 बाकी जो 3 जगह में मैं रहा हूँ, दिल्ली, कटक एंड अहमदाबाद, अप्रैल एंड में वो जल रहे होते हैं, राइट? सो माई मॉम इज आस्किंग मी कि कैसा है. मैं मम्मी को बोल रहा हूँ कि यहाँ पे ना मेरे को लगता है कुछ कहीं पे लो प्रेशर हो गया है. बिकॉज रात को ठंड भी लगी थी, दिन में क्लाउड्स भी हैं, गर्मी दिखी नहीं है. मैं आपको 1-2 दिन में बताता हूँ. 3 हफ्ता निकल गया. फिर मैंने लोगों को पूछा कि ऐसा क्या हो रखा है यहाँ पे. वो सरप्राइज हैं. फिर वो बता रहे हैं हमारा तो ऐसे ही होता है, हमने तो कुछ और देखा ही नहीं कभी. एंड देन यू रियलाइज इट इज दैट काइंड ऑफ प्लेस. वो एक वो जो यू हैव दिस ओ वाव मोमेंट्स इन योर लाइफ ना, मेरे को ये एक था. बिकॉज इन माई हेड I always thought कि South of India would be warmer because it's closer to the, So and then you come here and then फिर चिपक ही गया फिर यहीं पे.
So when you came to Bangalore, right? Let's talk about Bangalore in 2001.
Yeah.
I think that was the time when this Kingfisher pubs and all was opening. IT का boom भी आना शुरू हो गया था. And you are a person who predominantly was now at the उड़ीसा वाली साइड पे आप चले गए थे. मतलब वो दिल्ली वाला आपका एंगल चला गया था. And जैसा आपने बोला, you were not connected with people. Internet was not there.
Yes.
So you were not that urban also.
Absolutely.
Not that urban at that time.
Absolutely.
So when you came to Bangalore, now explain that to us. What were the new things you saw at that time?
Before that, I will talk about MICA. Right? Obviously. MICA was a transformational part, another transformational part, right?
Right.
You come in like pre-internet, right? Or just very nascent internet. So no communities or anything. You had a very bare bones website. 4 चीज़ें थी उसमें. And then you land here and and when I applied for MICA also, MICA is not at that time was not a classic MBA. Right? It was a specialization in marketing. And I majored in market research. And at that time, and probably I don't know if आज बदला है कि नहीं, but that time it was the only college in all of Asia that used to offer a specialization in market research. थोड़ा क्वांट भी था. एंड जब अप्लाई किया था कोई आइडिया
रिसर्च करते कैसे थे विदाउट इंटरनेट?
देयर वाज नो रिसर्च.
किताबों से करते थे.
देयर वाज नो रिसर्च, राइट? आई मीन स्पेशली इन कटक, राइट? कटक में कम्युनिटी भी नहीं है. मतलब कैट मैंने सुना ग्रेजुएशन के सेकेंड ईयर में, तो मैंने पहली बार कैट का नाम सुना. प्रिपेयर किया नहीं इन द सेंस दैट आई डिडंट साइन अप फॉर एनी कोचिंग और एनीथिंग. बट कैट का जो एग्जाम
है, कोचिंग एंड ऑल
दे थी दे वर देयर.
आई थिंक ऑर्गेनाइज्ड प्लेयर्स नहीं थे.
ऑर्गेनाइज प्लेयर्स नहीं थे, लोकलाइज थे. ऑर्गेनाइज प्लेयर्स आपके वो थे, मैं उनका नाम बोल रहा हूँ अभी. time nahi. There used to be these guys, Brilliant used to do these, test papers and physical copies aati thi.
Right.
And they were expensive. And I had a rebel phase in my life, which I will come back to. Before that, तो मेरी हिम्मत नहीं हुई थी कि पेरेंट्स को जाके बोलूँ कि अभी इतने पैसे दो कि because they used to be महंगा. तो so I did it without any of that stuff. I remember taking only the mock test because वो थोड़ा they were not expensive. अब वो भी एक local, there used to be a local coaching center, तो वहाँ पे कटक और भुवनेश्वर के स्टूडेंट्स आते थे.
तो जाके देख तो लें
फिजिकली जाके उनके साथ में मॉक टेस्ट किया कि एटलीस्ट समझ तो लेंगे कितने पानी में है. तो इट सीम लाइक कि ठीक है हो जाएगा कुछ ना हो जाएगा. सो फिर माइका पहुंचे. माइका में देन माइका वर द 2 best years of my life, hands down. Okay. And it is a thing that changes. It is a campus that changed perspectives for us in many different ways. Like if you ask me, go back and would you want to have gotten into an IIM? Maybe there's a 5% ki haan hota to acha hota because it gives you a different trajectory, right? But 90% I will not change it, right? Because I think what I'm doing today is in large parts that the trajectory that MICA set me into. Maybe if I'd gone to an IIM, I'd probably be sitting in a job and too scared to start up.
Right.
Possibly. Right? So, because it was a campus that, one, very bright students and very amazing combination of left and right brain, right? And also people who were comfortable with the unknown. Because MICA was the complete unknown thing at that time. It was not even a regular MBA. Right? So, क्या करने आए लोग किसी को नहीं पता है. And I have a friend who tells this amazing story कि there used to be account planning as a specialization, which is basically prepares you for advertising, account management roles. And they asked him in the interview कि why have you come? He said मैंने तो accountancy पढ़ी है, आपके तो वही लिखा है. So it was that far removed from reality, a lot of us. And we go there, and then the campus was amazing. It was outside, the main city, and it was an open campus. We didn't have wardens. We didn't have security cameras. We didn't even have like grills and what do you call them? Boundary walls. You could literally walk up to whoever, girl, boy, it didn't matter. You could walk up to anybody's room door.
Girl, आपने बड़ा specifically बोला.
Because it's a thing in India. See, gender segregation is a thing in India. और I'm talking about 25 years ago. Right. 25 years ago. No. I get it. But I'm trying to also tell you, right, 25 years ago, it was a big deal. You come from a small town, and then you suddenly see कि बहुत ही बढ़िया है, right? But it then gives you, it imposes that, that responsibility on you intrinsically, right? And I don't think in my 2 years there or subsequently or before I've ever heard people having to be uncomfortable or uncomfortable consequences of this ever. So I think that was another thing. So it opened your mind to possibilities and to how the world should be, as opposed to how the world is.
So MICA के बाद, I'm sure उस time पे HUL, PNG, ये employers होंगे main MICA. I'm just thinking.
So we used to have a lot of consumer companies.
Right.
We used to have a lot of advertising companies.
कौन सी agencies थी उस time पे?
Agencies उस time पे, so JWT was there. I think it used to be called Hindustan Thompson, or they were just transferring to JWT. Every agency, Madison, Mudra, Leo Burnett, all of these things have सबके नाम बदल रहे हैं, obviously.
Consolidate हो गई है सारी.
So consolidation बहुत हुई है, right? WPP ने तो मतलब empire खड़ी कर दी है. And so in fact I had a few jobs in my hand.
कुछ बताओ कौन
So Leo Burnett was one. TNS where I joined was one. I had a PPO from my summers in Pune, India's first design firm, Elephant Design. And so there were 3 and there was एक और भी कुछ था. वो भी एक interesting sidebar story है. But the thing is that, and I remember in the advertising job, the Leo Burnett job that I had, there was this gentleman who was the head of the agency. He had personally come down. and I had just, because the guy was there and he's a really interesting industry leader at that time.
You remember his name?
Forgetting.
You're bad with names.
I am horrible with names. I am so horrible with names. So, but he was like one of the names at that time in the industry. And I remember he did an interview. It was the most rambling interview ever. Random left field, right field questions, and wo ho gaya. And they offered me. And then I had this choice, and I thought my base should be more quantitative. I should not forget.
You had that
those
inside
skills.
that time.
It should, those skills, I should hone them in the real world before I look at other things. So I passed this one up, and I remember getting a call in the hostel from him. Okay, कि क्या हो गया? I said, sir, I want to do this. क्यों? This is my thinking. तेरे को नंबर करना है, मैं करा दूंगा. तू बता तेरे को चाहिए क्या? ठीक है. तेरे को इधर आना. And when you are a 21, 22-year-old, these are very hard situations, right? And I remember saying, I almost gave in. कि बंदा इतना सीनियर बंदा है, खुद वापस he wants me to come, and I'm all those things start coming up कि बॉस हाँ बोल दूंगा तो मतलब हो सकता है I'll be able to learn more, right? I'll be able to work more closely with somebody like that. But then somewhere in the back of my mind कि बॉस एक logic लगाई थी, एक reasoning लगाई थी why you want to do the other job. Don't move away from it. So I said no to him, and then I entered market research, did that for a year. Market research industry at that time, I mean, it has been an industry that's been contracting for many reasons.
What do you mean by contracting?
So it has been degrowing. It has been degrowing, and a big part of that is the field of data and analytics that has exploded, right? In some ways, it has been prey to the classic,
Tech has eaten it.
Tech has eaten it. I think perspective more than tech.
Okay.
Right? क्या होता है? Is that classic thing, right? When you have a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail. तो कोई भी problem हो, I will think in primary research construct. And even though the skills were all there, in fact, if you see amongst the earliest analytics leaders were people who came from this industry.
Yes.
Right?
Lot of them.
And some of the best ones. Some of the most...
you want to name a couple of them?
So there's this gentleman, Perry Goes. He just, he just retired as head of insights at UB. Brilliant guy. Also had the complete ANC culture, which in woke places people might frown on. I used to love the guy. He used to also, equally like chaddi utaro types, and also used to get along.
Right.
So and amazingly skilled at what they do, right? So, but as an industry, it was too slow to move.
How much was your salary? First salary?
Interesting question. So my first salary, I remember, was 2.5 lakhs.
Not less.
Annualized.
Still, yeah.
No, wait. My take-home salary was 10,800 rupees. So now I'll come to your question about Bangalore, right? So I remember landing in Bangalore, and I had never seen pubs before. कोई शहर में नहीं था in any of the shares that I had been.
Kingfisher ने खोला था ना यहाँ पे पहले?
नहीं, उससे बहुत पहले. So Bangalore had always been a classic pub city.
अच्छा.
Okay, Kingfisher के तो कौन से pubs थे मेरे को याद भी नहीं.
या तो उन्होंने खोले थे या प्रमोट कर रहे थे.
नहीं, so Kingfisher would be a sponsor, for example, or something. They'll put a logo, so and they'll get something.
लोगों ने ना documentary of Vijay Mallya, that's why.
So they association तो obviously था, but the pub thing was a very natural part of Bangalore always. And you had.
Why do you think so?
And probably. Probably that, right? In some ways, this has been one of the cities where also large alcohol brands have come out of,
definitely.
Right? And I think the fact that this became our technology, it was just starting to become the technology hub.
Young population.
So young population,
income.
Absolutely, and somebody who had seen the West, right? So I remember MG Road and Church Street were the hotspot. So it was very central at that point. Then obviously now you have hubs.
Yeah.
And so अपना ऐसा होता था कि रेंट के पैसे हो गए, खाने के पैसे
कितना
हो गए।
रेंट याद, इतना याद?
हाँ, सब याद है मेरे को। 10,800 में आपको हर पैसा याद रहता है। अभी आप मेरे को पूछो मेरी लास्ट सैलरी कितनी थी, आई वोंट बी एबल टू टेल यू, बट वो मेरे को याद है कि 10,800 में 3,500 रुपए रेंट होते थे।
और अकेले रहते थे? अकेला कमरा?
नहीं, वी हैड मी एंड माय बैचमेट वी हैड टेकन अ 2-bedroom फ्लैट।
अच्छा, सस्ता था यार बहुत फ्लैट तो, 7,000।
और क्या बढ़िया फ्लैट, 1200 स्क्वायर फीट का फ्लैट था। वो भी कॉक्सटाउन में, सो कैंट एरिया था, 10 मिनट था फ्रॉम MG रोड। एंड अब 10,800 की सैलरी भी तो थी ना। सो एंड देन 3,500 वाज, आई रिमेंबर दिस, आई रिमेंबर मेड का हम दोनों का स्प्लिट करके 500 आई थिंक 1,000 रुपया कुछ देते थे हम,
पार्ट टाइमर।
हाँ, सो शी वुड कम एंड कुक, हाँ, कुक एंड क्लीन, राइट, कुक, क्लीन and do other things in our home when we were not there. So she also had her payoffs, right? And then I remember, so that was that, and then there was the food bill, which used to be I think 2,500, ऐसे 3,000 कुछ होता था. फिर transport. First year I didn't have my transport. Second year I got a bike, and so ऑटो पे खर्चा जाता था थोड़ा. So आपके पास पब के 2 ट्रिप के पैसे बनते थे.
कितना 500 रुपये लगते हैं ट्रिप में?
हाँ, उससे कम लगता था,
उससे कम,
मतलब आपका 250-300 में हो गया. आपने बियर पी,
पिक्चर
थोड़े फ्राइज टाइप खाए, कुछ घर आके फिर खाना खाया, or maybe one dinner and one, you know, something. So couple of times in the month you could step out, but you could step out.
But you would enjoy that.
Or we used to love it. We used to love it.
Think about it the whole week.
And it used to be, yeah, absolutely. And first jobs, right? सबका रोना था. अरे कहाँ आ गए यार, क्या मजदूरी है, ये लाइफ होती है, ये थोड़ी सोचा था हमने. एंड देन यू नो यू वेंट फ्रॉम देयर एंड सो एवरीबडी वुड लिटरली काउंट डाउन. वो फ्राइडे इवनिंग बजे 6, चलो. और फिर वहाँ पे दुखड़े रहो अपने.
कौन सा पब था, कोई जहाँ जाते?
अरे मैनी. सो देयर यूज्ड टू बी, सो MG रोड पे देयर यूज्ड टू बी अंडरग्राउंड पब.
अभी भी है मेरे ख्याल से
अंडरग्राउंड पब, आई थिंक शिफ्टेड.
कुछ नाम.
फिर आपका वो होता था जो, अरे सबसे बेस्ट तो टैवन होता था, वो बेस्ट था. उसकी म्यूजिक तो मतलब फाइनली अनफॉर्चुनेटली शट डाउन, बट दे स्टेड विद देयर म्यूजिक एंड देयर फूड यूज्ड टू बी नाइस. फिर आपका एक वो नासा होता था, उस टाइम पे थोड़ा उसके रेपुटेशन थी, तो वो हम थोड़ा अवॉइड कर लेते थे.
क्या रेपुटेशन थी?
तो थी रेपुटेशन. एंड देन देयर वर अदर वन. सो उस लाइन में आई रिमेंबर देयर वाज और क्या थे, देयर वर एटलीस्ट 5 pubs in that stretch that we used to alternately go to in different times. I remember that was the high point, right? फिर बाइक आ गई, बैंगलोर भी
फिर आप जेनपैक्ट में चले गए.
फिर मैं, हाँ, जी था उस टाइम.
जी,
तो जी ज्वाइन किया. ठीक है, अगेन एनालिटिक्स है, क्या है नहीं पता है, पहुंच के वहाँ पे. Now I have no engineering in my background. I have no tech in my background. My MBA was also, if you see, very different types. So again, you started a little bit as an outsider to that world, right? Because that world was very quant, very econometrics, very statistics. This is 2002. 2002 August types. So कुछ 15 महीने मैंने I think TNS में काम किए थे. And in some ways, G was the foundation to my I had never thought entrepreneurship, by the way. मेरे पूरे family में कोई entrepreneur नहीं था. And you know, so it is not something that even came to your mind कि it's a possibility, because you'd never seen it. You only knew jobs. आप private sector, मैं private sector में I was the second guy in my family ever.
Wow.
And only because one of my चाचा's, my dad's cousin, had just moved, by the way. एक साल पहले. So ऐसा भी नहीं कि कोई पहले से था. He was in a government job and he left and he had just joined, I think, one of these tech companies a year before I started working. So
उन्होंने नौकरी नहीं लगाई, सिफारिशी नौकरी कुछ?
नहीं यार, जिंदगी में नहीं करी कभी.
उस टाइम पे तो बहुत होता होगा.
वो होता था, but my parents were a different kind. तो my dad, like I told you, right? He was in a department where सबने महल बनाए. ठीक है, हमारे घर में तो गाड़ी भी नहीं थी सेकेंड हैंड. एंड ही नेवर बिल्ट अ हाउस. वी लिव्ड इन द हाउस दैट माय ग्रैंडडैड्स हाउस, व्हिच ही एडेड टू, बट नॉट लाइक ही एवर बॉट अ हाउस सेपरेटली. सो वो थोड़े थे, तो वो, एंड आई थिंक दैट्स एन इम्पॉर्टेंट पार्ट. सो वन ऑफ द थिंग्स आई वैल्यू मोस्ट एज एन एंटरप्रेन्योर, एज अ प्रोफेशनल, इज इंटेग्रिटी. इट्स लाइक like उसको चेंज नहीं कर सकते. So back to G days, right? So G mein, so entrepreneurship was never there in my head, right? But my journey in G was completely entrepreneurial. G and Genpact.
कितने साल रहे आप?
10 years combined. G and Genpact, 10 years combined, 2002 to 2012. And in those 10 years, I never inherited anything. Whatever I ran, I built myself from scratch. So research की practice scratch से बनाई. I was the first guy, then I built my team. Or because I was the only guy who knew it, मैं जाके खुद ही बेचता था. Right? So you are selling like, I was 4 years out of college. I'm doing my own hiring. I'm doing my own selling.
Wow.
And I used to have the best rates in the entire business.
क्या rates याद है?
I remember हमारे उस time के rate I think कुछ 35 टाइप थे शायद अपने
$35 an hour.
I think हमारे overall rates I think 35 से 40 के बीच में थे. मेरे rates 45 थे के ऊपर रहते थे.
सही था.
Always. So I have always led with कि boss अगर if I can't realize this value, I'm never going to sell on arbitrage.
Wow.
Somehow it was there in my head, right? कि value create.
Broker नहीं बनना.
हाँ, वो नहीं करना, right? And so I built an entire practice.
और भी कई लोग थे उस टाइम पे Genpact.
बहुत लोग थे. So
name a few
in
people,
fact, this if you see, and I got lucky, right? I got lucky because I did not know what analytics was or what it would become at that point. And when I joined G, and you probably know this already, G was like the fountainhead of everything analytics that came out in India.
G and Amex.
Amex also, I would say, came later than G. In fact, a lot of people of Amex originally were from G.
Okay.
G was the first, 1998.
Wow.
G Capital set it up. And I joined them in 2002. And if you see some of the earliest people in that journey, 1998, are all successful entrepreneurs.
Like, name a few.
So Pankaj, who was my boss, Pankaj Kulshresh, right? And he's running a wonderful product startup, AI product platform startup, Synaptic. And then you had Prithvijit and Ashish and Preetham, who, again, amazing startup that they built and exited, Bridge I2I. Right? So, I look around and either people started up themselves eventually or they became leading members. So, I remember my interview was done by Shaindeep.
Oh.
Right? So, Shaindeep was the first guy to interview me in G.
Then he... what did he do eventually?
Math company.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
And then he went to Mu Sigma and then...
He went to Mu Sigma. He was one of the core members there for a long time. And now his company that he's building is absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
The math company is doing fabulously well. So, so that was the set. These were brilliant people, amazingly well at what you did. And G's culture, for the first time, it opened my eyes to a culture that did not base the relationship on authority. Right? It based it on merit. There was structure, right? And that structure, so there was decision making was obviously wasn't democratic, and in my personal view, should never be democratic. But opinions were welcome. Contrary opinions were even more welcome, right? And and I think in that mutual respect, I think which was different at that point in time, what traditional Indian setups used to be, which are very hierarchical, right? I think that when you have an environment like that and you sitting with brilliant minds like this, you eventually I think your new pathways form in your brain, right? And so if you see in my 10 years, my last 7 years, take the first 2 or 3 out, every role I did not exist in the company before.
Wow.
Every role was a brand new role. Half the time I used to write ye role aise hona chahiye. And I had the bosses to support them.
Name a few bosses.
So Jeet and Ashish were both my boss. Pankaj Kulshresh was my boss. Gopal Ratnam was a big influence. Gopal Ratnam I got to work with when I was still fairly junior. But I got to work with him directly. Because one fine day, we transformed as a function in G to a business in Genpact. So we were suddenly this business, many hundred people in the business, but we've never sold.
But still bulk of our revenue was G only.
Bulk of our revenue is still G, and therefore now that we are becoming a business, one, you have to continue selling to G, but you have to now open up.
Branch out
to other things. So, and we did not know, and we couldn't hire because analytics was a new thing. Who do you hire in US? So I remember 5 of us had gone, couple of senior guys, 3 middling guys like me, And we didn't have a playbook. We didn't have a training. We were practitioners who had to now sell. That was just an amazing experience.
This was your first trip to the US?
This was I had gone to US a few times before. This is the first time I moved there.
Okay.
And I moved there and
you were on an L1 visa?
L1, right? On an L1 I moved there and I had to figure out how selling works. I never sold before that. And I was able to. I cracked, I remember, we didn't have, other than GE Healthcare, which is a devices company, and it was GE obviously, we didn't have any healthcare pharma client. And I remember cracking J&J. Right? That was the first, healthcare pharma client. It was a big one. And what worked was, obviously there was a client partner, colleague, you can call them, who was a GE, very senior person in GE, who moved there.
Got it.
And and he gave me a call. He said, "I'm here. Come and tell me what you can do for me." And we built something that was an amazing experience. And sometimes one of the things I realized, one of the lessons I took away from that, right, is when you are in a greenfield space, you don't know the space doesn't know you. That's the best opportunity for you to build your story, right?
You're riding the wave.
More than that, right? I'm saying that if somebody knows what you do, they already have put you in a box. When they don't know what you do, you define the box.
Right.
Right. And so when we went in, I remember we did this. We went in. See, till that point, right? It was like an outsourcing function still, right? There, I went in pure consultative. I built our image that way. The way I defined a project was that way. So I presented. I remember my total experience at that time would have been 5 years. Okay. And I presented to 3 J&J presidents in one meeting.
Wow.
And it was a 5-slide presentation. And मेरी जो फटी थी, I can't tell you when I was doing the presentation because खुद बनाई थी. And in the second slide of the presentation, I said कि आप घंटा कर रहे हो.
So you said that.
Yeah. So they were trying to do an implementation of a sales strategy, and I'd interviewed people and all that, and I'd made these 2 pyramids. I still remember, inverted pyramids. I said कि ये जो है ना, ये value, and I put levels, I remember. And I said कि ये value वाला pyramid है. तो इसकी value highest है आप लोगों के लिए. ठीक है. जो ये नीचे बैठा है उसके लिए value इतनी है. और फिर the other pyramid was the effort pyramid. कि आपका effort इसमें इतना जाता है, उसका इतना जाता है. Why will he be invested? Right? And I remember कि मैंने कहा कि इसमें या तो जूता मार के निकाल देंगे, ठीक है, या फिर maybe it will resonate कि कुछ तो बता रहे हैं हमको. अब it was hilarious. Gopal was visiting US and I told him कि मैंने बड़े एक्साइटमेंट में बोल दिया कि ये ऐसे प्रेजेंटेशन हो रहा है, मैं तो इनको कर रहा हूँ. गोपाल सेड मैं भी आऊँगा. मेरी तो फट गई,
नौकरी जाएगी.
मैंने कहा हे भगवान, उनसे बचा तो ये खा जाए. ठीक है. And I remember we went in and if it wasn't spicy enough, the setting, the only other person in Genpact, from Genpact at that time, was my future wife.
Oh. Okay.
She was in that room. She was part of that project.
Wow. So you both went to the US together?
Separately.
Interesting.
Separately, and there is another weird, funny moment. Okay, I didn't bring her in the project. My client asked for her.
Don't lie.
When I have to tell you the story. My client, because he had worked with her,
right.
He said, "I want this person."
Okay.
And I remember trying so hard not to smile at that moment.
Right.
I said, "Sure, I'll make it happen."
Right. For the company.
Right? Obviously for you, right? And I remember she traveled, and we were out for dinner, and I tell him I'm getting married next month.
You right? Tell the client.
The client, I'm getting married. And he's like, oh, congratulations! And where's your bride to be? What does she do? I said, she's sitting right here. So he nearly fell off his chair. Wow. He was like, Did you telepathically tell me to do this? I remember that conversation so clearly. It was hilarious. So that was the room. It settled well. Again, J&J had the highest paying rate amongst all our customers across all our verticals, right?
They still pay very well.
They still pay very well, and they still are a client of Genpact. But we settled that baseline. So that's another thing, I took away. It just struck me that it's really, you got to have the right story, which you got to back with the right abilities. Right? But nobody's stopping you from carving out what you think you can do. Only you decide yourself that, okay, I'm going to stop at labor arbitrage. Right? That's your choice. But it doesn't have to be. And if you see that progress to a point where, to me, I think my inflection point when I decided to quit and start this was I felt we had missed that bus in technology. IT services have been around for a long time. And I felt we were doing it again in the data science space, which is we had the world's largest pool of talent. And we were just happy with arbitrage. It's a great business. Made Bangalore, made India a technology hub, amazing amount of talent and, the pull through that it created. I mean, you can't, take anything away from any of that.
Right.
But I think we could have done more. Right? And I think IP creation is something that was a bugbear. And I remember seeing this stat around that time which showed Israel had the same amount of technology exports as we did with 1% of the manpower that we were using. And that stuck in my head. Why can't we do it? And that was really, I think, कि अब तो हम बनाएंगे, हम भी करेंगे. तो started up, had no clue.
ये 2012 की बात है.
2012 ना टेक्नोलॉजी आती थी, ना प्रोडक्ट बनाया था कभी, राइट? एंड ना कभी एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप की थी या कुछ आइडिया था एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप के बारे में. सो ऑल वेक्टर्स वेर फ्री फ्लोटिंग. And in that journey made all the mistakes that you could possibly make, right? The only two things that we got right were we built a super grand vision and we always stuck with it. There was so many moments of कि यार dilute कर देते हैं, in the sense, not in so many words, but saying कि यहीं पे इतना बना लेंगे तो ठीक है. And as a team, we somehow said कि नहीं, जो सोचा था वही बनाएंगे.
जब आपने 2012 में start किया था, right? That was a time a lot of these boutique analytics shops were opening up.
Yeah.
Like Fine, Trends.
Yeah. Bunch of
Bridge I2 also that time.
They had just opened a year. I'd almost joined them, by the way.
So a lot of them were opening up, right? So was it FOMO or did you guys actually see a macroeconomic play here?
No, that's what I'm saying. I think the word startup had entered the dictionary, the local dictionary. Flipkart आ गया था, right? It was not very big yet, but the word startup had entered.
And Mu Sigma was already there.
Mu Sigma was there. You're right? Mu Sigma, अपने space में Mu Sigma was there.
And Manthan.
Mu Sigma, Manthan, and EVS. Right? These used to be the three pure play, players at that time, as far as I remember. Who had created some substantial size.
Had good revenues that time also.
That's what I'm saying.
25-30-40 million के revenue थे.
Substantial size के वो हो गए थे. So you know that it is possible.
Right? And 2011 में, if I'm not wrong, Mu Sigma raised their first big round. If I'm not wrong, and that really made people question कि है क्या?
Yeah.
They were a unicorn at that time. They were India's second unicorn. If I'm not.
So yeah, that's an interesting story. I mean, the story became a little unfortunate after that, but I think they were torchbearers at that time.
Definitely.
Right? And in again large parts, if you see, and you could see that difference, right? In Genpact, we were still very traditional. We were still कि हम बनाएंगे और वो बिक जाएगा, right? It was still lot of purists, lot of practitioners, right? Mu Sigma was built around a story of what is possible, and that is so important, right? And
decision science is what they used to
decision sciences, they're the first guys who used it, and I remember we are like, decision science, तो हम क्या कर रहे हैं, right? But the truth is, they built that story. We didn't build the story, right? We built capability, but capability needs a story, right? And so yes, all of that ecosystem was just starting. Funding was still a challenge because
services business tha log ki nazar mein.
So services business they were willing to see. The hierarchy was this. The hierarchy was anything consumer, most focus was there because everybody was seeing the meteoric rise that Flipkart was starting to see. So now I'm describing not just 2012, but the 2012 to 2015, 2016 phase, right? So, which is around the time we wanted to sort of raise funds because we started up, took some angel funding. Maybe we should have taken it, maybe we shouldn't have. I don't know. I made many mistakes, right? And then you see the subsequent time, there was all of this funding starting to come in, and you start hearing these VC names. But the first thing, and I spoke with a few at that time, and it was very apparent, and they would tell you about it as well, right? Consumer was top of the thing because scale. Okay. Second was आपका enterprise services, because they've anything IT services, anything analytics services, because they've seen that work. But you need some threshold for that, which means you can't get an early stage funding in services. It's impossible. And it doesn't make sense also. You have to show that you have some scale and you'll grow. So, so late stage VCs it was obviously a great favorite. Then aapka tha ki, SaaS. SaaS was just starting. This is mid 2015, mid 2000s, mid 2010, 20 wala jo decade hai. 2015, 2016, SaaS was starting to come into play. So SaaS was another. Bottom of the pile was enterprise software. Because nobody had built enterprise software at that time.
India did not have buyers also for enterprise software.
So India didn't have buyers.
International
buyers were there, but no software had come out of India other than Zoho. And Zoho was not that big yet. And Zoho was SaaS. You didn't have large enterprise software ever out of India. Right? And so, how do you sell it? How do you brand it? What is the credibility that you have? That was always a big question mark. So investors like, एक तो आपका विजन बहुत ही ज़्यादा फ्यूचरिस्टिक है, ये बन भी सकता है, बना के दिखाया, ये देखो बन सकता है, बट ये खरीदेगा कौन? So it was, I remember going through a lot of that. But
how was that experience?
It wasn't great at all, right?
कितने investors से बात की?
I would have spoken to close to 10 at that time, right? In the investor community, it was also a lot smaller. There were fewer VCs than there are today, far fewer VCs. And
these were all mature funds, or they were like early stage?
There was no early stage.
कुछ था ही नहीं.
Right? They were all
tiger level types.
Like they were all in the sense that you didn't have anything that was like a. You had few. You had the Patni brothers, their fund. I'm forgetting the name. It had just launched.
The Patni Systems on, right? Like
yeah. I'm forgetting the name of that fund. I'm forgetting the name. So they had, I think, just launched about that time, and so they were looking at early stage. There were a couple of early stage funds, but most of them needed for you to be at a certain revenue threshold, right, for them to even talk to you. And that was clear.
And
so
you
they would
have
be
bankers that time.
We did have bankers. We did have bankers when we did this. We did have bankers. When we realized even our bankers were struggling to understand what we're doing, right? Because what we're doing was so new.
Right.
It was just and I've told you this, right? We ended up building a new enterprise software category.
Right.
LENI. LENI, right? Which in that category eventually is now called decision intelligence.
LENI kya hai? Because I was looking at one of your speeches and all.
Right.
You compare it to Jarvis.
Yeah.
मेरे को समझ बिल्कुल नहीं आया. So can you please break it down for me, like as if I'm like a 5-year-old toddler or something?
No, absolutely. Inspiration तो हमारा वैसे ही था. So me and my co-founder Ashish continues to run Fosfor at LTI. We had a daily ritual. So we didn't do stand-ups and formal meetings. He used to do his thing, I used to do my thing. दोपहर को lunch के बाद 3 बजे we would go to Krishna Sagar.
अच्छा. And
have filter coffee.
Nice.
वो खड़े होके. And that was it used to take about 15 minutes, to do that. That 15 minutes में हमारी सबसे ज़्यादा brainstorming होती थी. Not by design, but वो होती थी.
बातचीत कर रहे हैं.
हाँ, तो हम बात कर रहे थे कि यार ये जो Jarvis है, Iron Man तभी आई थी.
Iron Man 2 or 1? 2.
Because Pehla was something else. Jarvis, I think, was the second or third. So Jarvis आई थी, and then we were saying कि यार यही तो हम solve करना चाहते हैं. Because there is reporting. In the data and analytics world, there are 2 areas traditionally. एक है आपका जो BI and reporting है, which is where आप information लेते हो ऑर्गेनाइज करते हो, डेटा लेते हो, इंफॉर्मेशन में ऑर्गेनाइज करते हो, विजुअलाइजेशन, दैट इज विजिबिलिटी. देन द अदर इज स्ट्रैटेजी,
insights.
राइट? स्ट्रैटेजी, आई टेल यू व्हाट, आई कम बैक टू इनसाइट्स. देयर इज स्ट्रैटेजी विच इज आपका डेटा साइंस, राइट? कि आप किसको लोन दोगे, किसको लोन नहीं दोगे, राइट? कौन सी प्राइसिंग विल गिव यू द मैक्सिमम आउटकम. सो और या सप्लाई चेन फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इन्वेंट्री कितनी रखनी चाहिए. Those were strategies. You use data science to build those strategies, right? अभी इसके और इसके बीच में it is not a straight line. To give you an example, कि आप अपने रिपोर्ट देख रहे हो और आप देख रहे हो कि आपका सेल्स थोड़ा प्लेटो होने लगा है, राइट? अभी you went through a certain process. I'll come back to the process. उसके बाद you go to the end strategy. आपने क्या करी? आपने बोला कि we will launch this promotion. ठीक है, और ये प्रमोशन करेंगे, वी विल गेट अ अपटिक. लेट्स से यू गॉट इट, बट हाउ डिड यू गेट हियर? यू डिडंट डू इंकी पिंकी पोंकी, राइट? दैट इज द इनसाइट प्रोसेस. एंड वो क्या होता है? इट्स अ वेरी एड हॉक थिंग, बिकॉज यू डोंट नो, राइट? यू आर वर्किंग विद अननोन्स. सो फर्स्ट यू स्टार्ट विद द फाउंडेशनल क्वेश्चन इज कि पहले तो प्लेटो क्यों हुआ, व्हाई डिड दैट हैपन? सो समबडी हैज टू गो, एंड दैट्स द हार्डेस्ट क्वेश्चन टू आस्क बाय द वे, राइट? तो you because you got to go and figure out, उसका कोई माई बाप नहीं है, right? You got, it could be external reason, internal reason, right? And
domain specific, थोड़ा domain का flavor आया था.
Domain, it could be many things, right? Did it happen because customer की preference बदल गई, मेरी distribution enough नहीं थी, competition ने कुछ कर दिया, any number of factors, right? So you essentially do a series of hypothesis testing and then you come up with insights. Then you do further insights.
Right.
कि अच्छा ये ऐसे ही रहेगा कि बदलेगा, will it become worse or better? तो थोड़ा predictive वगैरह कुछ करोगे. So it's a series of insights you build till you get to a point कि saying अच्छा promotion एक run करना है. Let's assume that the reason was competition ने कुछ किया था, promotion एक run करते हैं, let's get this back, right? That process in between is a very critical process. It's also an extremely manual process, which means there is that much time between when you first diagnosed and when you actually built a strategy.
Fair enough. And
the world has been changing. The 2010 से 2020, digital and cloud have transformed the world. आपके पास अब वो time नहीं है, right? पहले if you think the pre-2010 world, right? आपका any consumer company would plan marketing campaigns over a period of months. कि अगले क्वार्टर में ये करेंगे, एंड दे हैड दे कुड टेक द टाइम टू रिसर्च, बिल्ड क्रिएटिव व्हाटएवर. अभी आपके डिजिटल इसमें रोज दोनों कैंपेन होते हैं. सो हाउ डू यू पुट इंटेलिजेंस इनटू इट व्हेन योर टाइम इज क्रंच्ड, राइट? सो हमने कहा इसका कुछ तो तोड़ होगा, राइट? इज वाज द थिंकिंग. एंड फिर हमने कहा जारविस तो यही करता है. अब जारविस फिक्शनल है, उसको रियल कैसे बनाए? And that is what vision we went with, that we wanted to create a form of artificial intelligence that took decisions on its own, that did not use pre-built query, but built it itself in real time. It was unheard of concept at that time, right? And a lot of foundational technologies were missing. और हमने कहा कि ये तो अगर ऐसा करेंगे तो हम business user को देंगे, because the whole point is to not have additional translation layer कि एक analyst भी चाहिए, ये भी चाहिए, ये भी समझाओ, वो भी समझाओ, कोई स्टोरी बना रहा है, वो सब हटाना है, बिकॉज दे ऑल कॉन्ट्रीब्यूट टू द टाइम. एंड सो लॉन्ग स्टोरी शॉर्ट, हमने कहा कि दो फाउंडेशनल चीज़ हम सॉल्व करें. एक कि रिमूव द बैरियर टू इंटरेक्शन. तो इफ यू इंटरेक्ट विद द एनालिस्ट इन अ सर्टन वे कि भाई समझा दो क्या हो रहा है या क्यों हुआ, देन yes, right? So language, plain English language. So it has to be that. और वापस भी वैसे आना चाहिए. If I throw a bunch of charts, numbers, statistics, आपको नहीं कुछ समझ में आना, and it's not your business to try and figure that out. And so how do I change that? How do I make it come back to you in a business language? So that was one huge challenge. And the second is what was happening in between, the intelligence creation, right? Because you should be able to ask me any question. अभी मैं सारे pre-build तो नहीं कर सकता हूँ. So, so instead I'm teaching the machine how to respond or how to trigger a certain analytic pathway in certain scenarios.
Wow.
And so what happened then is when you ask a question now, what LENI started doing was it started building its own query.
And this was for any particular domain or generic?
Across, it's generic, which taught me the foundations of how you build product, right? Because in services you can your control to get a great outcome is high because the problem is defined, right? The context is defined. When you're building a product, you're solving for infinite contexts. And well, I shouldn't say infinite problems, but
I know what you mean.
different problem scenarios, right? And how do you solve for it? So that forward thinking that product development teaches you is something amazing.
Wow.
So that's what LENI did, and that's why our goal was Jarvis. And LENI, by the way, the name LENI came from an internal contest. We are, मैं आपको बता रहा था राइट कि अपना तो वो बहुत ही फ्लैट स्ट्रक्चर था, बहुत ही
कितने लोग थे टीम?
We were about 50 people and it was flat, right? I mean, anybody could walk up to anybody, have any kind of conversation. And I remember doing one thing which I thought was interesting, which I think people found very interesting. It was a experience, and we said, why are we inheriting, अगर सब owner हैं, तो why are we inheriting designations and titles? आप owner हो, आप अपना designation खुद बनाओ.
Really?
And we had the coolest designations come out.
Give me a couple.
I can tell you mine.
What is it?
Chief Light Bulb.
Chief Light Bulb.
Yeah. Because I looked at my role. मैं करता क्या हूँ यहाँ पे?
कुछ आइडिया?
मैं आइडिया ही देता हूँ. फिर मैं बोलता हूँ कि अब आप लोग एक्सपर्ट हो, अब आप लोग इसको रियलिटी बना. मैंने आपको ये बल्ब दिखा दिया. Right? And that was my role. Right? And some very interesting such titles came out. I think one, it makes people come out of boxes.
I know what you mean.
Right?
Cool.
It makes them start feeling entrepreneurial.
It's a good idea.
It allows them to think about what they're actually doing. Please. It allows them to think about what their roles should be, right? Not just what they are defined to be, but what they should be.
Right.
So that was a great experience. But and so we used to do all of these things collectively. So LENI, I remember मैंने भी कुछ 2-4 नाम दिए थे. वोट नहीं मिले. तो and LENI, a lady who started her career. Most of these 50 people started their career with us, by the way. They're not lateral people.
And how was your attrition?
Always lower than industry standard. Wow. Much lower. To give you an example, anytime company goes through an M&A, you lose a bunch of people. And over the next 2-3 years, you pretty much lose everybody. I was around for 3.5 years, and of those 50 people, I think about 42 people are still around.
Wow.
And of the 7-8 people, most of them have actually gone and started up.
And you have invested in them.
And I've invested them. I've invested them. Because we used to always have that very open culture. Very open culture. If somebody said, I want to go to another company, we used to never start the conversation ki nahi mat jao. We used to always be curious, kyun? Is it a better job? Is it more money? If it used to be more money, we used to have a discussion. यार इतना ज़्यादा मिल रहा है, हम शायद इतना दे सकते हैं. I don't think we ever matched, right? But हम इतना दे सकते हैं. But तेरी job कैसे interesting कर सकते हैं बता? Right?
Nice.
And and the vision, right? कि for everybody we're very clear तुम कहाँ जाना चाहते हो?
Right.
And we'll create those pathways. So I think a lot of that helped. The sense of ownership helped a lot. So we were always very open. So and these guys said we want to start up. I got very good यार. सबको करना चाहिए. ठीक है. So I can't say no to you. मतलब ये it'll not be there कि मैंने कर ली अब तुम करना चाहते हो, मैं बोलता नहीं तो मैं चिपके रहो मेरे साथ, right? So it was a very open conversation. So it was very planned always. So कोई जाता भी था, they never inconvenienced and left कि मेरे को कल जाना है, right? They used to work with people. I remember, there is this generative AI startup, Yarnet, that the founder, in fact, the whole team is actually the original core team of 4 people.
Name a few people in that team.
So JD, Jyotirmoy Datta, he's the guy who's founded it. Brilliant guy. I find a little me of myself in him, right?
I'm sure you
comes from a pharmacology background.
Wow.
He's building a deep tech company.
Wow.
Right? That not having a fear of unknown, right, is just something that resonated a lot with me. Brilliant guy. His core team has Abhinav, used to head data sciences for us. Again, a brilliant guy. वो ड्रीमर इंसान है, वो या थिएटर करता है या डेटा साइंस करता है, बीच में कुछ नहीं करता. So interesting set of 4 people. And I remember when he wanted to go, JD मैंने कहा तू कर, मेरे को 6 महीने चाहिए लेकिन because I need you to do these things. And he did it.
He did it.
He did it. He gave me those 6 months. So we always had that relationship.
Wow.
Ki once we are together, now we are a family.
Nice.
So
And you still meet them? Still meet these folks?
Yeah, I'm invested in them. No?
हाँ, नहीं.
तो ऐसे ही मिलना होता है. But otherwise also actually.
Right.
So we meet more socially than, to be honest, as an investor or anything. I feel very personally invested in their success, right? Money or capital aside. So that's sort of, I have forgotten what your original question was, by the way.
The question was Lymbyc, right? Lymbyc.
Yeah.
We understood your journey. We understood what you built.
Right.
Way ahead of the industry. Right. Now, as an entrepreneur, like as an owner of equity, we are all custodians of equity, right?
That's right.
So eventually, we all have to exit someday in some form.
That's right.
So that was your form. We understand that. We want to understand how, as a passionate entrepreneur, building that team at that time, कैसा लगा मतलब to actually sell? And लगा होगा, people will call me a sellout.
So I'll tell you when we did the exit.
This was 2018,
2019. It was again a collective decision. In fact, I was.
You asked them?
No, I was the last person. So people know. So we were very transparent always.
Yeah, deal.
हमारे सारे 50 लोग deal. I remember we didn't announce it to all 50 people. We don't want to confuse people.
Yeah.
Because अगर नहीं करेंगे तो
छोड़ देंगे ये हो जाएगा.
हाँ मतलब नहीं.
Confusion हो जाएगा.
Yeah, we didn't want to create confusion. In fact, we were more scared people will leave if we tell them कि हम deal कर रहे हैं.
हाँ, naturally.
ठीक है. So so I think we gradually announced, but my core team, for example, knew it from day one, right? And even otherwise, when we used to have bad months or whatever, bad quarters, everybody always knew. We were always super transparent.
Nice.
And I think, see, when you're building a sense of ownership, it can't be just lip service. Then you have to follow it through, right? My one regret was that I had not planned my ESOP structure well. In fact, my entire equity cap table structure was screwed up. Okay, समझ नहीं थी तो बहुत mistakes करी. So some part of my people had equity, not everybody had. That's a regret I have. But I was getting there. मैं कर रहा था, right? But before that, this event happened. But in all other ways, in what they did, how they defined their jobs, when they wanted to work or didn't want to work, somebody wanted to chill out one day and say कि आज अभी मेरे को Netflix देखना है. Everybody knows the goal. You come to it, right?
Nice.
You come to the goal.
Yep.
You own it, right? So so I think that so we're all invested. Now coming back to this thing, I told my core team कि ऐसा आया है, and then we'd been doing this for 7 years, and I think some of us, Ashish, me, we also had life stage events happening. Parents were aging. There were some health concerns. We had not made any money beyond, let's say the salaries we were paying ourselves. There's no wealth, right? And in fact, जो savings थी वो भी झोंक दी थी, right? So it was like the consensus was कि चलो, and the offer was a decent offer from a company like L&T is one of the companies when it comes to India, and if they find value in you and they're offering you a good deal, to be honest, it's worth thinking about. And the team came back, and I remember saying, are you guys all sure? Because I was still holding on. अगर मेरी टीम बोलती नहीं करना है तो हम नहीं करते, right? So हमने बात करी, हमने करा, and I remember
very interesting thing, by the way. The investment bank that made that was part of that deal. I was interning there. Probably at that time.
Wow,
only.
yeah.
Khetal,
you were in Khetal. Yes. Yeah. So how small the world is, right?
Right. I was interning at that time.
Khetal के साथ मेरे बड़े complaint हैं.
I know.
But they helped us to the deal, and and I think for them also it was a nice win to show a tech company that did an exit, and so I think if you look at the stages, there were negotiations, there were something, there's due diligence, वो सब हुआ. Signing भी हुई, signing के लिए I had gone to Bombay, I remember, and signing भी हुई. Headquarters में हुई. And
बड़े headquarters.
हाँ, so वो सब हुआ, right? सब कुछ हो गया. The day we had to physically leave the office,
बड़ा बुरा लगा.
that was a super emotional day. In fact, हमने weekend किया, हमने कहा ये होगा नहीं, सबके साथ नहीं कर सकते. So I remember me, Ashish, and Jyoti. Jyoti was my EA.
Okay.
She was like our office manager. We are a very lean team.
Like an HR kind of.
So HR, we had another person. So we had an HR person, finance person, office manager, come my EA, and that's it. That was our entire team, support side pay. And I remember Jyoti was also, if I was employee number 1, Ashish was number 2, Jyoti was number 3.
Very nice.
And Jyoti was, I still remember, she was like, tears are flowing. Right? And then Ashish and me, we are already feeling emotional. I remember our wives had come.
Oh.
And this was on a weekend. And I remember because we are emptying our office, we are going to the LTI office, we had things, right? We had from your
cups,
electric kettle से लेके कुछ चीज़ें हैं, right? So we did an auctioning. हमने कहा या तो हम बांट देंगे, but we just said कि on a lark we did an auctioning, and everybody wanted a piece of the office. I remember मेरे को कुछ नहीं मिला. मेरे को एक आई थिंक फाइनली मैंने कहा कुछ तो फिर आई थिंक एक केटल शायद मिला. बट बिकॉज पीपल आई थिंक इट्स नॉट दैट दे वर valuable or anything, right? But it's, I think everybody wanted a connect to that office. In fact, one thing that I regret is that we had this, we didn't have a lot of decoration and stuff in the office, but we had this giant canvas which had everybody's handprints.
Wow.
Right? And I remember taking it and hanging it in an LTI office, and I regret it so much. मेरे को लेके घर में जाके टांगना था, मैंने कहाँ लेके टांग दिया?
Now you can't take it out.
I mean, the team is still there, right? I'll feel bad to hog it. वो उस टाइम पे चांस था, उस टाइम पे मेरे को कर लेना चाहिए था.
Right.
But so that was a very emotional moment.
So Sadi, after selling Lymbyc, right? Now that you look back at that journey, and as an entrepreneur, what do you think were some mistakes that you did, and name a couple of them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing you started with saying name a couple of them because we're going to spend the rest of the afternoon and evening, just going through the sheer number of mistakes. I think the first is just how to be an entrepreneur, right? And some of these things, and I see that still happen, a little less though, because the ecosystem has evolved, people know things today. But, just how should your cap table be structured? When should you take money? Who should you take money from? That completely screwed it up. Right, so that was, I think, a big mistake. It put limitations in later rounds of funding. It put limitations in what we could do for people. So that was, I think, one giant mistake. The second thing was, the timing of building the sales engine. We are building a product company, right? In services, you can play it by the ear because all you need is a deck, and you sold. फिर आप then you can आपने लोग बंदे ले लिए उनको लगा दिए you can jump start it, right? प्रोडक्ट में या तो प्रोडक्ट है या तो प्रोडक्ट नहीं है. हमने हायर कर लिए, प्रोडक्ट बन रहा है, so they're sitting there doing nothing, right? And then you हाँ, तो timing it becomes very tricky, very right? And you have to get the right kind of people. Wow. I went and got people who had sold data science because I was building a data science product. Absolutely the wrong idea. I should have gone and brought people who sold enterprise software. Because when you're selling a product, you should know how to sell a product, right? That's far more important, and who to sell it to. Then understanding the nth level of detail inside it. Right? That is why if you see, you have you have that specialization today, right? In amongst the enterprise sales guys, there are sales guys, and then there are specialists, right? Who are technical specialists in the sales function who support that. So that was, the makeup and timing was probably the other, big mistake amongst the many mistakes.
So when you sold your company, right? When you got your first check or whatever, what is the first thing you bought?
Actually nothing.
Don't lie.
No, seriously.
Seriously.
So I remember there's lots of temptation. So, for many reasons or whatever, I love driving. I love an open road, my music, and, just get on it.
Bangalore,
and I've always, that's why I said, that's why it started with open road, which means outside Bangalore. So I love doing, long trips, right? So from Bangalore, I've driven, this side I've driven as far as Ahmedabad.
Wow.
This side I've driven as far as Cuttack and Bhubaneswar. And then pura all of South India I've driven most of it. And if there is one vice that I have many, but one where I tend to overspend, it is the cars. I've always bought cars that I cannot afford. So I bought my first BMW when I was starting up. So amongst the many mistakes,
when you were starting Lymbyc, you bought a BMW.
So 2012 I started, 2014 I bought it. So you can imagine. ठीक है. अब वो it's just that I have a in all of this, right? I don't think I could have done any of it if I wasn't married to Raj. Okay, because I had an amazingly good job offer when I was starting, and I was very tempted. No, it was this big global insurance firm, and it was head of strategy.
Wow.
Global head of strategy for their global business and analytics. At that time, if you got a head of analytics role, and I had about 10 years of experience, 11 years of experience, that would have been a big deal. But I was getting overall head of strategy and analytics. It was a senior VP role.
Wow.
11 years into this thing. It was out of my league actually.
Wow.
So I was superbly tempted. ये कर लेता हूँ, फिर देखता हूँ, कुछ साल बाद देखते हैं. And I remember Raj telling me, अब नहीं तो कब? And that's true. The whole, when you think about it, it only adds up to more, right? Anyway, so she was supportive in many things, including this. That's why I managed it. And
Which was the first BMW? 3 Series?
No, it was a X1.
Achha.
Because I always needed a vehicle that I can take anywhere.
SUV.
I can't be. All the cars are so much more fun to drive. I had a Civic before that.
Fantastic car.
Again, bought a car that I couldn't afford.
Fantastic car.
My first car was an Icon. And I have to tell you this, Ford Icon 1.6, right, the top end one. And I remember GE का leasing scheme था, उसमें लिया था, उसकी EMI थी 15,000, मेरी take home salary थी 27,000.
बड़े स्मार्ट हो आप.
तो मेरा या तो मैं उसमें पेट्रोल डालूं या मैं खाना खा लूं.
वाओ वाओ.
तो I was seeing Raj at that time. Okay. We were मैं राज बोलता राज यार पेट्रोल डाल दे थोड़ी निकालेंगे इसका आज.
Wow.
So but it was like that, and so that was my first car that I drove, that I owned, and वो एक है कि I want to drive. So I don't know why I'm talking about cars here.
But you were telling me that
the first thing you went. So I was very tempted. Because मेरे को पता था मेरे को क्या चाहिए.
कौन सी चाहिए थी?
So I wanted an X4 and an X4 or maybe a Range Rover
Evoque.
Velar.
Thank God you didn't say Evoque.
No, Velar. So Velar I test drove it, but
it was very expensive that time. Velar. So उनका Indian version आया नहीं था तब.
नहीं था.
आ गया था.
So I'm talking. Okay, maybe not. But see, here's the thing, right? 2019 में मैंने नहीं किया ना. I held myself back.
अच्छा.
2020 में कोविड आ गया. 2021 तक मेरा पेशेंस खत्म हो चुका था और मेरे को लगा कि हो गया अभी तो निकल गया. जनवरी में मैंने ऑर्डर किया, टेस्ट ड्राइव करी, गाड़ी लिया और फिर मार्च में मैं निकलने वाला था भ्रमण में और कोविड 2 आ गया. तो दैट वाज अ सेपरेट स्टोरी कि पहले 6 महीने मैंने गाड़ी चलाई इतनी धोई ज़्यादा है, राइट. बट सो द ओनली रीज़न आई डिडंट गेट द वेलर वाज बिकॉज वो क्या होता है ना, एंड ऑफ द डे फिजिक्स तो फिजिक्स है. जितनी भी एडवांस गाड़ी हो, once it's tall, there will always be some sideways lateral motion, and Raj and my son are very sensitive to that. तो वो उसकी मतलब मेरा दिल तो आ गया था. बाहर खड़े हो तो it had like presence, right? So then I went to my मेरे को लगा था कि BMW से कुछ छोड़ के कुछ और ट्राई करूँगा. बट घूम फिर के वापस I came to X4 and we love it. It drives like a car, feels like a car. But you can take it anywhere, right? And
sporty as well as
it's got a nice 3-liter engine, so it can give you the revs that you want when you want it. So I love it. उसको मैं पिछले साल लेके गया था in Lonavala लेके गया था. Lotte time I picked up COVID.
So
I drove in COVID. So मेरा fever आने लगा.
तब भी चला रहे थे.
तो मैं literally in the morning breakfast के time I can see my fever coming. अब मैं सोच रहा हूँ मैं रुक जाऊँ. फिर मैं सोच रहा हूँ अगर कोविड हुआ होगा तो फिर तो रुक ही जाऊँगा. निकल जाता हूँ. And I remember by the time I reached Bangalore,
हालत खराब.
I had 103 fever.
Shit.
And अब मैं गाड़ी से निकल रहा हूँ मेरे को ऐसा लग रहा है कि मेरे पुर्जे अलग अलग निकले.
Wow.
So, but I love driving. I just absolutely love driving. So, to your point, the first thing I bought was the X4, but that was almost a year and a half after the sale. Oh, first thing I bought was a house.
No, obviously in Whitefield.
In Whitefield, but that there was more capital gains.
Right. No, I understand. वो 20% बचाना होता है ना tax. Right. So now you are in LTI, and I think this is the time where now you start getting like a good salary. Now things are more stable. But then also आप कुछ entrepreneurial करना है तो Fosfor का कुछ कौन सा?
So it was this, right? I mean, the first temptation is to just keep your head down, finish your time. Get the targets that you have,
right,
and make your money. But and you're there, and then after a while, kya kar? See, because now a lot of things that you're doing as a chief executive, you no longer need to do.
Fair enough,
right? Because now you are in a larger company where a lot of those things are being taken by somebody else.
Right.
So you are still responsible for making sure your numbers happen, but once you've done what you've done, it just seems like a part of what you can do. So then I was like, ab hain to kuch karte hain. And I remember going to the board and making this proposal, 6 proposals over 8 months. And the premise was very simple, that you could use this like how every other services company treats every other IP acquisition, which is that, ki aap isko, it's a positioning strategy. That, we have cutting edge, we have IP, and you can do that. It's your right and choice to do it. Or you can build a business. Now, it's not going to give you revenue. Let me tell you that upfront. But it will give you valuation, right? And nobody's done this well. We can do it. And we had, I think my 3 years in LTI, what worked for me was leadership was awesome. So Sanjay,
he just left, right?
Sanjay just left.
Yeah.
He was visionary, and Nachiket, who was CEO, and
he's now the CEO now.
No, he's continues to be the CEO of the combined LTIMindtree entity. Okay. Nachiket, I have met fewer brilliant people than Nachiket, right? For somebody, when you speak to him, soft-spoken, but absolutely incisive mind, right? And he gets startups, he gets finance, he gets technology, and he gets the services business, right? In fact, he was one of the reasons, he and Shom were the 2 principal reasons we landed in LTI, to be honest. Otherwise, there were a lot of misgivings. IT services company hai, Indian company hai. Kya hoga, right? But the conversations with them was the clincher. And so they were very supportive. So we, and I think that it allowed us to do this. And they gave us the money. We built Fosfor is probably the most radical branding we've seen in any part of LTI ever.
I heard कोई French company ने की थी branding.
We got this European company called Saffron.
Yeah.
Brilliant set of people to work with. The same guys who did Meta's rebranding. Facebook's rebranding. Brilliant set of people. It just opens up your mind, the discussions I remember we went through. So it was a great this thing to build it up, create a new brand, and you are taking many different parts. You're taking our startup, the Lymbyc startup, you're taking things that were homegrown in LTI, you're taking other startups that they had acquired, and you're trying to create one cohesive unit. So it was a lot of challenges, right? Because you're taking essentially product teams and you're turning them into a product business. So there were many functions that didn't exist at all that we had to create from scratch. So it was fun. And, that's what I did till then now it's there where it is there. The team is completely capable to take it forward. And then again, मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ? Same question that I asked myself when I was making the Fosfor pitch. And then I said, let's do something interesting. I have been working with startups, as an angel investor, as an advisor as well to some of them. And I was like, I have to go back and do something there. That's what excites me most, right? I mean,
that adrenaline rush.
Yeah, and in this, so like how Peter Thiel called it, right? The whole, the journey of the entrepreneur, right? The 0 to 1. So now you have this, right? You can break up any organization into one of three stages: 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100.
Whatever.
Right. And I've realized I'm absolutely not a 10 to 100 person, right? I can do 1 to 10 and it's okay. 0 to 1 is where my excitement lies. When you have nothing and you got to build something out of nothing, I think is the part that excites me most, because the possibility at that moment is infinite. At any other part of the journey, it is only lesser.
I think the hope, that's the beauty there.
Yeah, and the thing that you can do anything with your imagination at that point, right? I think that's what really excites me. So that was, end of my journey with LTI.
So tell us a bit about angel investing. And I think a lot of senior professionals, right, like CXO, C-suite level people are now getting into angel investing. Shark Tank has played a big role in democratizing the knowledge about angel investing. But how did you get into it? And if you could tell a bit about your investment philosophy.
Sure. So, I came out of that world, right? And I know how hard it is when you are very early, right? You're just starting off. Money matters, right? Expertise matters. And it's the hardest part of the journey, right? That's where the highest fail rate is, right? While we say 90% of all startups fail, but, it's over a period of time. First year itself sees, anywhere between a fifth to a quarter of them fail, right? That's the hardest part. So I continued to stay there. People that I knew who were starting up. I joined an angel network as part of Mumbai Angels. Became an LP in a couple of funds, it excited me. My investing philosophy is it's really two things, and which is what everybody will tell you. There's nothing new you'll probably hear here. The first is the people, right? So if you see my portfolio, outside of the funds that I've invested through, there is things that I've done through the angel network, and then there are some that I've done direct. I think it's always centered around what's that founding team. That's right. Who's in the driver's seat, right? And who's in the pilot or navigator seat, right? And I think that is probably the foundational thing. And the second is, what are they building? Okay. Now, in that second part, I will tell you, going back to my own origins, right? IP interests me above anything else, right? And the next would be product, where you may not be building new IP, but you're still building product. Services, not so much.
Fair enough.
Right? And because the non-linearity, very difficult to get in the services business. Right. So if you see my portfolio, there's no industry-specific sort of thing. It's agnostic. But I do look more actively for deep tech. I do look more actively for healthcare and pharma. I think that's an overall quotient of development. If you look at India, I think that's an area that really needs more things to come up. Not a fan of edtech, right?
You should be. That's what he's saying.
The only reason I'm saying that is that I think there's a lot that has happened in it. Maybe there is different way to look at it. Maybe more technology. EdTech is still more using technology, but it's still business model centric. So maybe there's a different way to look at it, perhaps. But deep tech, and deep tech can be many things, right? So tech for tech's sake, or space tech, defense tech, all of that I'm sort of kind of clubbing there. Healthcare and life sciences is definitely one area. Energy is climate tech, but energy specifically. In fact, a couple of startups that are really close to my heart. There is this battery tech startup, and it's 4 scientists, right? So this is one where I flipped the idea, not the founder, right? I've gone with the idea, and obviously the founder's capability to build on that idea. And what are they trying to do? They are trying to create, they're trying to build sodium-ion technology. Now, lithium-ion technology is the principal, sort of thing, because that material lends itself very well, right? It's the most efficient material. It is also a rare material. It is also an expensive material. And now we've just discovered a bunch of stuff in Kashmir, thankfully for us, right? But the fact is, it is still a rare material and expensive. And sodium, on the other hand, is abundant. It's everywhere. And it was brilliant hearing their presentation, not because they were doing fancy storytelling. It was a very simple explanation of why sodium ion doesn't work. It has got to do with the material technology, right? So it's a material technology problem, and they're doing very different, interesting things. They just filed a couple of patents. They actually secured their first, other than the angel round. No, they got they've secured a seed round, and it's a smallish seed round, but they have an institutional investor now outside of the country investing in them. They're making progress, and I love that. There is a menstrual hygiene product company. It's called Lymbyc. The founder, Devi, I have been working with her since the day she started this company, and that company and that founder is amazing at so many levels, right? Because women in general have a hard time in the corporate world, right?
Right.
And as an entrepreneur, they have an even harder time, and all data supports it, right? Only 2% of funded startups are women-led, right? So massively underrepresented. So there is obviously a lot of headwind they go up against. And there are biases. Those biases exist in the investing community also,
right?
To be honest, right? And to be able to fight that, build a predominantly women team, and going into a mass market and building a product-led premium niche. And so everything they've done on the product side, branding side, and the overall business, I think is very inspirational in some ways. And so it's not a space I fundamentally understand, either from a product standpoint or a D2C standpoint, because I've always been B2B. But it's amazing seeing what young entrepreneurs are able to achieve.
Right.
And in fact, sometimes when I look at it, I think that I got lucky in the generation that I was because किसी को कुछ नहीं आता था. Some of us started.
Right.
Few of us became successful.
तब information भी कम थी. बहुत चीज़.
अभी अगर I had to compete with you set of entrepreneurs, including you, तो हम तो कहीं नहीं होते.
नहीं, so now you're starting something up, right? Again, you said a new term to me when we were talking. Would you like to talk about what you're starting up?
Sure.
I know it's still in stealth, but a little bit if you can.
No, I'm happy to talk about it. So, like I said, my choice here was twofold. Start up again, and I had a couple of ideas around which I could build, or help startups, which is something I've been enjoying for the last few years. And I remember it boiled down to this one weekend where I sat down, and fundamentally the question that I came to was, do I want to be captain again, or do I want to be coach cum player? I still wanted skin in the game. I don't have
ज्ञान नहीं देना आपको सिर्फ.
हाँ, मेरे को ज्ञान नहीं देना खाली, and plus neither do I know I'm a hardcore investor who can only exist of investing. I neither have the money nor the skills.
Fair enough.
So the idea was I should have skin in the game. I should be able to contribute with whatever experience I have, and be able to sort of help startups become more successful. And I started with the idea of an accelerator, saying, and in fact for women, for tier 2, tier 3 founders across gender,
wow,
because these are underserved communities, and if these are underserved, it'll be a harder. There's a reason they're underserved, which means you got to solve for that. But the payoff could also be that much more interesting. But I did a lot of research. I went to small towns. I spoke to.
You went?
Yeah, I did, and I went to a lot of these government, because in states like Odisha, for example, right, you don't have an ecosystem. So now the government's trying to create an ecosystem. So you have a hub, it's called Odisha Hub, which is modeled on the Telangana Tea Hub, which is, I think, an amazing model.
Amazing.
Brilliantly
I've been
run.
there. Phenomenal.
Brilliantly run. I went to Tea Hub also. I met their director as well. And what I realized is that when you start going away to smaller towns, the ecosystem needs to evolve a little bit more. Because throughput hi nahi hai, right? So,
A bit early for that, do you think?
yeah. So I said, okay, what else can allow me to do? And then I came across venture studios, right? And so venture studios are, it's a different take on startup investing, where you may or may not invest capital. What you invest is expertise. So you as an entrepreneur, you have 5 things that you need solving, and let's assume it's a tech
Right.
product you're building, but you may not be a tech person, you may be an industry domain person. So instead of trying to figure out, a co-founder trying to figure out how to build it, I will build it for you against equity, right? I studied that model. I really like that model, but I also realized it has its own drawbacks, right? So you have VCs on one end who bring in capital, who invest in people, which means they're saying, you guys still know what's best for you, right? We are investors. We will come in and ask questions and all that, but you guys know what they're best.
Right.
And I think it's only fair, because somebody who's starting up, they're starting up because they have a vision in their head and they want to translate that vision. So they need that independence. Now, if you think about venture studios, I find that model a little too controlling, because the equity structure is a little
Venture
bit
studios.
too skewed. Yeah, it's a little bit skewed too much towards venture studios. They range between 30 to 80%.
What?
In some cases.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And so when you think about somebody owning 80%, then it's no longer an entrepreneur. You are basically hiring a CEO against equity.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, but that's an extreme form. Most venture studios are in the 30 to 50%, which also I feel is too restrictive. So I wanted to find, the best of both worlds. So the model or the variant of venture studio that I'm looking at is a variant that approximates a VC when it comes to capital investment, and approximates a venture studio when it comes to expertise. So the idea is you work with much fewer people than a VC, right? But you are trying to increase the probability of success for each of them so much more by being part of it, by taking operational responsibilities for certain things, while allowing the founders both the giving them the time to focus on building the business itself, and the independence in how to build it, right? So that's sort of what I'm settling on, because all investing has been about spread.
Yeah.
Right? So it's you
Right.
look at it and you're like, so you by default they're going to be winners, and
You're playing on probability.
you play on probability, you play on spread, right? But an entrepreneur doesn't think like that. And you know that, right?
Right.
And so to me, in this model, it's so much not an investor as it is an entrepreneur who's investing, co-investing. So it's the term that I think of is, one of my partners, she actually came up with it, limited co-founder. I see myself as a limited co-founder in the
Interesting.
company, right? And that's what I'm looking to
Wow.
do. I have, I don't want to boil the ocean here, because we want to work with select few. So, looking at this point, maybe experienced entrepreneurs with an idea that should be, tech-backed, because, I want that scalability, which should have hopefully an AI component, because that's a competency I will create in the venture studio. And, something that you can reasonably hope to get to a revenue in a 12 to 15 month time
Wow.
frame. So a lot of filters, but that's the idea. The idea is not to go after quantity, but go after a finite quality, right, where you have a chance to make a bigger impact.
So let's say there's a person out there who is working in a job, in a domain
Right,
for 10 odd years.
right,
They have an idea,
right.
but right now don't know whether they can execute it or
Right.
whether it's a business model. Can they also reach out to you?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely. See, there are two things there, right? One is entrepreneurs cannot be made. They cannot be invented. They can be discovered. So there is that filter, right? I find a lot of such people, but it's almost like they're saying spoon feed me. That won't work, right? So there's a fine line between that and then a set of people who really want to and are maybe held back by just, saying, I don't know how to. Right?
Very interesting.
Because I don't think today that community, people who's given some time, to industry, who are not like, fresher, younger people, but people who have given it some time, I don't think they are constrained by, the economic cost, right? They are constrained more by how will I make it work? I have only done a job. I know I have an expertise in a certain area. How do I get all of these things? And I think that's a community that I would definitely love to have a conversation with anybody who's there.
So, Sati, one last question.
Sure.
I think this is the longest podcast that we've ever done. One last question for you.
I don't know if that's a good thing or
that's
a bad
thing. That's a very good thing. That's a very good flow. So, one last question for you. An advice you would give to a 22 or 23-year-old self that is starting up, that is getting into this space, analytics, startup, whatever. What is that one piece of advice?
Oh my God, that's so many. But if I had to pick one thing, right? I would say I have to qualify it. A career analytics guy, right? I can never give an absolute answer. I have to qualify it. The qualification here is that, you're not chasing a pipe dream. That you've thought through an idea, you are validating the idea, all of those standard steps, right? That apart, the one piece of advice I would give is truly believe in yourself and your idea, right? There is enough of the world out there who's going to doubt you. You don't have to add yourself to that mix, right? Stay with it. Again, with the qualification that, it's not just hawa mein kuch bhi, right?
Bada mushkil hai batana. That qualification part, right?
I agree. And maybe that's where people like us reach out to people like, and it doesn't have to be me or my model, right? Talk to other entrepreneurs.
Mentors.
Right? Talk to mentors. And there is now that Bangalore today has that ecosystem.
Definitely.
This place we are sitting here, Koramangala, or you go a little far out to HSR, right? You walk into any coffee shop, every table is a startup.
Yeah.
So, and there are enough people who are happy to give, time and advice. So do that. So put in the hard yards. There's no shortcut. You have to put in the hard yards. But when you do that, there will be 100 times every day you will be made to feel, or you will yourself feel that शायद नहीं हो सकता, शायद मैं नहीं हूँ. I'm saying you don't have to add your doubts to the mix, right? Let other people doubt you.
Makes sense.
You stay, you keep your belief.
Perfect. I think this was an amazingly insightful chat, and I personally, because you talked a lot about being an entrepreneur, about starting up, about the highs and lows. So for me personally, this was a very personal chat with you. Didn't feel like that we are shooting at all.
Right.
And I'm really, really grateful that you also advise me, you also mentor me for that.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Sati. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me here. I enjoyed it.